fall is upon us. In fact, it's actually basically almost over. I'm a little bit late to this, but I figured I would pop in here. So I am Joe. Welcome to my channel. I am a singer-songwriter in the band Hammond Bay. Also the songwriter, one of the songwriters rather, and the singer of Rust Never Sleeps. Links are in the description. But I wanted to come on YouTube today, pop in. I'm not an expert, right, by any means. I do feel, however, like I'm an aficionado of the fall vibes. Fall is easily my favorite season. It's immaculate. There's always so much going on. There's leaves falling down, pumpkins, scary skeletons and whatnot. Just kind of a general atmosphere of spook and spooky and dark and darkness. So without further ado, all right, I wanted to get into my top 10 favorite fall albums of all time, in my opinion. Without further ado, here is number 10. That's going to be Annabelle Dream Reader by The Witches. A couple things to say about this album. I found this a couple years ago, kind of on a whim. Had never heard of the band. Honestly, they kind of fell off after this, I'm not going to lie. This is the first album, as far as I know, the first major for sure. But it's good. It's solid, right? It's got some super jangly guitars. What I would describe as like spooky surf rock. So if you're into like that kind of like Dick Dale, Beach Boys almost, sort of like that surf rock guitar style, this is like the only real example of like a spooky surf rock that I found that I think actually sticks the landing, becomes more than a novelty. Standouts on this album would be White at Midnight, Dig Saw, and Crying Clown. I think all three of their songs are really good, a super good representation of what this band was kind of at their peak, which apparently was the beginning of their career. Again, not trying to roast them too hard, but I followed this band pretty religiously after I found this album, and they have not released anything that I think is even close to the quality of this record. But this is definitely like fall in an album. Again, that spooky surf rock sort of thing, super reverbed. I think that's really what does them the favors here. I think that's kind of what gives them that like autumnal vibe. Distressed vocals, they do a lot with dynamics. Super great album. Definitely listen to it if you haven't yet. Coming in at number 9 is going to be one of my favorite bands, used to be my favorite band, Queens of the Stone Age. This album is Lullabies to Paralyze. Definitely not my favorite in their catalog by any means. I think this would actually rank pretty low as far as their albums for me, but I will say this album definitely has that sort of like fall, spooky kind of creepy vibe to it. Josh Homme, the guitarist, my favorite guitarist of all time, he usually dips kind of like into that like macabre sort of theme sometimes, but I think they really dove in with this record. Obviously the name, I think the name is kind of indicative of that. Album cover for sure is kind of creepy. Some standouts on this album would be Everybody Knows That You're Insane, Tangled Up in Plaid, and I Never Came. The latter specifically, I Never Came, with one of the coolest kind of like neoclassical guitar riffs that I've ever seen in like this style of rock. I definitely think that Josh Homme and the crew kind of peaked at different levels on different albums, and this one is kind of a riff monster, which he's kind of known to be. But I heavily recommend it for anyone who likes Queen of the Stone Age or Caius or like Josh Homme and his kind of vibe. For people who don't like his style, definitely this is the same thing. You know, it's Josh Homme, it's Queens of the Stone Age. If you're not a big fan of that, or if you're looking for like an entry level Queens of the Stone Age record, I would definitely recommend like Clockwork or Songs for the Deaf. Those are definitely two of their biggest albums, probably my two favorite of theirs. Moving on, we are at number 8, and I am super happy to talk about this band. This is The Albatross by Foxing. This is their, I believe, debut studio album. Again, Albatross, standouts on this record are going to be The Medic, Rory, and Inuit. The Medic and Rory were the first songs that I got introduced to Foxing through. A friend of mine had reached out to me, told me that they were kind of math rocky, you know, kind of this interesting thing that they had cultivated. I was skeptical, to be honest with you. I'm not the biggest fan of math rock. It's always kind of turned me in the wrong direction. It's kind of pushed me away. This album, though, I could not recommend more. I mean, this is, to me, the quintessential math rock album. Like, this to me is like, I know people will talk about American football, people will talk about all these other things. This to me is the kind of stuff that I like to listen to with like that Midwest emo, American football adjacent sort of vibe. Like this to me is it. I've seen this band perform live, and it was easily the best concert I've ever been to in my life. Would highly recommend going and seeing Foxing whenever you can. This is not my favorite album of theirs, but it certainly is my favorite of this style in the genre. Again, The Medic is an incredible song. I mean, the vocal melodies, his vocals, he can bounce between this like falsetto and then this distortion so easily. It's kind of insane. Honestly, I have literally no idea how he does it. And he can do it live, which is so insane. Like I said, you got to see him live. If you like this band, you have to see them live. I think Connor Murphy's his name. Phenomenal. My favorite album of theirs is Draw Down the Moon, which was their second to last album. They came out with one a couple weeks ago that was pretty good. Not my cup of tea per se. But The Medic and then Rory, again, Rory was one of those songs, really blew me away. The amount of space they use, the drums, everything in it is just phenomenal. So definitely would recommend it, especially for autumn. Coming in at number 7 is one of my favorite bands, but not my favorite album by them, but one of my favorite bands, Modest Mouse. This is A Long Drive for Someone with Nothing to Think About. This is their debut album. If you're familiar with Modest Mouse, you kind of know the vibe. Really jangly guitars, almost out of tune at times, kind of lispy vocals, really weird dynamic vocals, weird lyrics, poetic lyrics all over the place, with like thematics. I would highly, highly recommend this album from them. My favorite album of theirs personally is Moon in Antarctica, but this definitely fits that fall vibe more. Dramamine being the massive standout on this album, first song on the record, easily my most played Modest Mouse song. There is quite literally nothing like this song in my opinion. I don't think there's anything that stands close to it as far as like the vibe and the theme that it cultivates. The guitar part in it is probably my favorite guitar part of all time. Couldn't recommend it more. Other standouts would be Breakthrough, and then Talking Shit About a Pretty Sunset. Those are all phenomenal songs. Again, if you haven't listened to Modest Mouse and you're kind of into that like jangly, I don't want to say lo-fi, but like almost experimental guitar work, there is no one that does it better than Modest Mouse. They're phenomenal, really weird, very cool guitar lead parts, weird uses of distortion, tons of really, really cool stuff all over this album. Would highly recommend. All right, coming in at number 6 is a band that I found fairly recently. I think like 2 years ago I found them. This album is actually from 2020. It is The Great Dismal by the band Nothing. This album is super, super, super cool. Definitely like an instant fall classic for me. When I first started listening to it, I liked it. The second or third time I listened to it, I loved it. I was hooked on it. It's that blend of like shoegaze, reverb, and just like dynamics and space that like I'm addicted to in the fall. Standouts from this album would be Fabricated Life, which is the first song, Catch a Fade, my favorite song on the album, Famine Asylum, and then In Blueberry Memories. All of those songs are phenomenal in totally different ways. In Blueberry Memories is kind of like this acoustic, I don't want to say ballad, but like the closest thing to a ballad on this album. Famine Asylum is like this just incredible, almost like Smashing Pumpkins-esque guitar riff, phenomenal vocals. The vocalist in this band really, really kills it every time. Just super drenched in reverb vocals, drenched in reverb drums. The kind of stuff that I love to hear in the fall. Couldn't recommend this album more. It is phenomenal. I would definitely recommend checking out some of their other stuff too. It's a little bit different, but this by far is my favorite record of theirs. Also, gotta talk about it, but the album cover is like so goofy. And you know, I'm a big album cover guy. I love it. I collect vinyl. You know, I've got stuff that I look at. The pictures are right there, right? But this album, something about this album, I couldn't tell. I was attracted to the album cover right at the back because I was like, what the hell is this, right? And it was not what I was expecting, but I feel like it fits the vibe and I can't really describe it. But couldn't recommend more. Definitely give this a listen. All right, guys, number 5. We're in the top 5 now. This is where things start to get a little bit more serious. This is where these are albums that I've kind of listened to for a long time. A couple different years now. These are like my fall classics. Number 5 is going to be The Grime in the Glow by Chelsea Wolfe. If you haven't listened to Chelsea Wolfe and you're a fan of spooky stuff, horror movies, horror books, really any of that kind of like nature, you have to listen to her. She cultivates like this kind of witchy, dark aesthetic that is just so potent and very, very mysterious. She's like super, like not much is known about her. She doesn't really talk. She doesn't really do interviews that much. Kind of an underground artist. She's been in the underground for years making music. This is her first studio album. I believe she had some stuff before this, maybe some independent stuff. I'm not too familiar with her earlier stuff, but this is her first album that I'm familiar with. I listened to this, found this on a whim a couple years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, was hooked immediately. It's a lo-fi vibe, I will warn you. So if you're not really into like lo-fi or you're looking for a higher quality production style, this is not the album for you. She does a lot with like 8-track recordings, home recordings. It's very lo-fi, and it can be kind of distressing on the ears. I'm a big fan of the style, especially for the spooky atmosphere. It really adds to it. Standouts from this album would be Advice and Vices, rather, which is the first song on the album, Cousins of the Antichrist, and then Half Sleeper. And Half Sleeper being one of my favorite songs, my favorite acoustic songs of all time. I'm a huge fan of Chelsea Wolfe. Her vocal style is something that you can't really describe. It's haunting, I guess would be the best description of it. It kind of sounds like a ghost. Like if a ghost was like, I don't know, if a ghost was like, you know, got picked up by Geffen Records or something. Like if a ghost, it's like if a ghost like, yeah, I got nothing. I don't know. It's like a ghost, really is what it's like if you're walking through a graveyard and a ghost was there and the ghost was like, here's Wonderwall. You know, it's like if the guy, yeah, it's like if the dude in college that always played guitar died, like this is what his voice would sound like. I don't know. Anyway, that's Chelsea Wolfe. Very good. Would recommend. Okay, number 4. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. Certainly was one of my favorite albums of all time when I was younger, my teen years, early college. This was the album for me. It's going to be The Devil and God Are Raging Inside of Me by Brand New. If you're familiar with Brand New, then you know why this album is such a big deal. This was kind of like their turning point in their career. They went from being sort of like punky, post-punk guys to being like this sort of a powerhouse in the scene. Kind of genre-defining albums getting released from these guys. This album was phenomenal. A couple other albums in their catalog are also really good. I think this is probably my favorite of theirs. Standouts from this album are going to be Sowing Season, Jesus Christ, which is this beautiful haunting ballad. Changed my life when I heard it in high school. It's one of my best friend's favorite songs of all time. So I've heard it a billion times and it never, ever gets old. Would highly recommend. I don't know how to pronounce it, but DeGosser, Limousine, and then also probably my second favorite song on the album, You Won't Know. Just a perfect haunting album. This album does a lot with dynamics. There's a lot going on with dynamics, which is kind of a theme that you'll see in this list, especially when we get towards like the other picks in this list. Dynamics are really important when it comes to like that fall aesthetic, I think. Striking a balance between distortion and ballads and this acoustic energy. And there's not much acoustic stuff going on in this album, but it is just like really beautiful. The vocalist, I can't remember his name, Jesse something. He is a phenomenal vocalist with dynamics. He's really good at like balancing this singing and then going into this like really gritty distortion in his vocals. Would highly recommend this album. And we'll get to their later catalog in a little bit. All right, so these are the top 3. These are like the big hitters. These 3 are all like really dear to me. Some of my favorite albums of all time. Number 3 is going to be Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life. This album, I mean, what can I say that hasn't already been said? This is a internet staple, legendary underground rock album. If you haven't listened to it, you definitely should. I will say, this is an acquired taste. It's a weird album. There's a lot of empty space, a lot of kind of boring segments in this album, for lack of a better term. I love this album. It took me a while, though, to get used to it, a couple listens, and I really had to invest some time into it. But once it clicked, it really clicked. And the vibe and the energy that this album cultivates is something so potent that even just talking about the album is getting me fired up. Makes me want to listen to it immediately. This is easily one of my favorite albums of all time, probably in my top 5. Who knows, maybe I'll make a list one day going over that. But this album is so good. Standouts are going to be the first song, a quick one, Before the Eternal Worm Devours Connecticut. Goofy ass song, goofy ass name. I literally can't describe why this song hits for me. I used to listen to this when I was working landscaping. I would drive in the morning at like 5:30 to work every day. And I would put this song on, and it was like the exact amount of driving that I needed to do. And I don't know why I did that, but I would just drive to work every morning, and I would just sit like that for like 8 minutes listening to this song. It just hit can't really describe it. And then the going from that into Blood Hell is like, oh, dude, Blood Hell. If you haven't listened to this album, Blood Hell is like the song on this album. It's like the hit song, right? If you can call it that. The vocals are so haunting. The lyrics are something that's stuck in my head permanently. Guitar parts are phenomenal. The reverb, the space, everything about the dynamics of this album is insane. Couldn't recommend this album more. Although, be careful. Like I said, I would highly recommend listening to this when you have like time to really like kind of unplug. This is not something that you can like just listen to while you're doing something else. You will get mad. It's just a fact. Like I don't ever try to like work out to this album, dude. You're gonna get unpumped. Like you're not gonna have a good time. You're gonna be depressed. You're gonna be sad. You're gonna you're gonna want to shut this off, throw it out the window. Like it's that sort of a thing. So be careful. You know, user beware. But this album is phenomenal. Number 2. This album changed my life. No lie. Probably the coolest album I'd ever heard when I heard it. I found this album in high school, as most people do, I think. It's Spiderland by Slint. This album screams fall. This album in the number 1 spot, which we'll get to. Don't worry. We'll get there. This and the number 1 spot, to me, are on a different plane of existence. Death Consciousness is there too, right? Like it's up there at the top 3 is huge for me, but something about this album and my number 1 pick are just like they're on their own islands, right? Like this is like so unbelievable what this album did for me, what it taught me about guitar, what it taught me about creativity, what it taught me about how age really doesn't matter with making music, like all the stuff that it taught me, right? And there's so much you can dive into with this album, but I've been talking too much. So standouts are going to be Nosferatu Man, Don Amon, Washer, which is probably my favorite song on the album, and then Good Morning Captain. I'm not going to talk ad nauseum about it, but the guitars are phenomenal. The guitar work is phenomenal. Tone is phenomenal. Vocals are phenomenal. Lyrics are crazy and weird and sparse and creepy. Everything about this album is phenomenal. Highly recommend. Okay, and before we got to number 1, I wanted to go over a couple honorable mentions, stuff that didn't really make the 10 for various reasons, but stuff that I think you should definitely check out. Number 1 is going to be Manning Fireworks by MJ Lenderman. This album would make this list if it hadn't come out this year. It came out like a couple months ago, and this album is phenomenal, like front to back. There's so many standouts, I can't even mention it, but definitely check this out if you're into like kind of an alt country sort of thing. MJ is really, really good at his lyrics, and he's like almost like a modern day Bob Dylan with the kind of the stories that he is able to thread. Maybe that's an overstatement, but I think he's phenomenal, and I think he has staying power. I look forward to seeing what he does for the rest of his career, but if this album hadn't come out this year, it would 100% be on this list, and if I ever do an updated list, he will be on it. So definitely check him out. The other honorable mentions, one being Cardinal by Pine Grove. Pine Grove is a really good band at cultivating a certain vibe. They're kind of like lo-fi, kind of Modest Mousy a little bit with the vocals. Very interesting stuff. I don't really think there's anyone else doing their exact like vein of like alt country, if you can call it that. Would highly recommend this album, Cardinal, which I believe is their first album. Definitely my favorite of theirs from their earlier catalog. And I think the one that fits the like fall vibe the most. Beyond that, I have to shout out Science Fiction by Brand New. I know Brand New is already on this list, and that's why this isn't on this list, but it was hard choosing between Science Fiction and The Devil and God. Science Fiction was the first Brand New album that I got like really addicted to. It came out in 2016, right when I graduated high school. Me and my friend were huge fans of it. But this also has like a very fall vibe. It kind of has this like lo-fi recording aspect to it in the background that's kind of going on. Kind of interesting, but would definitely recommend it if you're a fan of Brand New. And then last but not least would be Higher by Chris Stapleton. Kind of an oddball pick for this list. Again, that's why it's an honorable mention. I'm a huge country fan and a huge Chris Stapleton fan. I think he's one of the best vocalists alive right now. And Higher is a great album, probably my favorite of his. It doesn't necessarily cultivate like an extreme fall vibe, but country music in general kind of has that like autumn and fall sort of atmosphere for me. I'm from Michigan, so it's kind of like a thing here. You know, I feel like a lot of people listen to country music. But regardless, I think that this is a for sure solid pick for somebody trying to look into some country. So couldn't recommend more. But let's get on to number 1. last but not least, this is my number one fall album. People who know me know what this is. Jar of Flies by Alice in Chains. This is probably in my top 3 favorite albums of all time, top 5 maybe. It's certainly up there. This album was huge for me. I found it at a very young age. My dad was an Alice in Chains fan. Got me onto Dirt, got me onto Facelift, their first couple of albums there. And they connected with me. I was into that hard rock style, but something about this EP, rather, I guess it's technically not an album. Something about this EP just speaks to me. And I think that that's kind of universal. I know that Nutshell has kind of been having a renaissance right now, but there are so many songs in this album, this EP, that deserve to be just as big as Nutshell. Standouts are going to be Nutshell, obviously, one of the greatest acoustic songs ever made, something that every guitar player should know, something that I have played every single time I pick up a guitar. It's like the song I play. It's just the way it is. It's kind of like the modern version of Wish You Were Here, I feel like, in the sense that every guitar player of that generation just knows it, and it's kind of just like permanently ingrained. That song is phenomenal. Haunting vocals. Lane Staley is one of the best vocalists of all time. He's definitely one of the best from the grunge era. Other standouts, Rotten Apple, I think, is, again, one of the best songs that could ever cultivate a fall vibe. Like, when I think about fall music, when I think about, oh man, it's getting cold. Like, when that first 65-degree day hits and I'm sitting in my car, I'm like, I'm throwing on Rotten Apple or Nutshell. Like, those are the 2 songs that I'm going to every single time. And that's something that's been the case for 10, 15 years for me. And I don't think it'll ever change. So if you haven't listened, would highly recommend. Every song on this album, with the exception of maybe the last song, is like a masterpiece. Even Whale and Wasp, which is like a very weird, almost like Top Gear. It's like if Top Gear was like haunted. Like if the set with Top Gear was haunted, that's what it would sound like. But odd song, but very cool. I Stay Away, beautiful. No Excuses, beautiful. Could not recommend this album more. Yeah, definitely give it a listen if you haven't. All right, so that was my top 10 fall albums list. I know it was pretty informal, and I think it ended up being way longer than I was trying to make it. And again, I'm not an expert, right? Like, this is just my opinion. I love talking about music. I'm going to keep making music videos on this channel, just me discussing stuff. If you have other stuff you want me to check out, other stuff you want me to review, any other lists you guys want me to make, decade lists, anything like that, just let me know in the comments below. But thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Again, this is kind of like a new thing that I'm doing. Just in my downtime, I want to start throwing up videos on here. So let me know what you guys think, and we'll go from there. Also, music video in the works for Rust Never Sleeps. We got a new album coming out in a couple weeks here, so more information on that. My solo stuff is also in the works. There's some stuff going on in the background, but we'll let you know about that later. But thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you are interested in seeing some other videos. Thanks. Bye.